I'm investigative journalist Molly Barrows. For years, I've covered the stories that made headlines in Northwest Florida and all along the Gulf Coast. Murders, missing persons, and mysteries of all kinds. These cases are far from over for many victims because the full story has yet to surface. Join me for Gulf Coast Confidential, where I dive into the saltier side of the South and expose the lies, greed, and corruption that often weighs down the truth. It's time to turn the tide and get a shot at justice. Hi, I'm Molly Barrows, a longtime reporter in Florida's Panhandle, and welcome to my investigative series, Gulf Coast Confidential, where we dive into the saltier stories that surface in Northwest Florida and all along the Gulf of Mexico. My co-host, as always, is Pam Hill. Pam, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And for those who aren't familiar, Pam's sister was killed by her own son, Pam's nephew, on Christmas Eve of 2013. He was found not guilty by reason of insanity. And as a pharmacist and a grief and loneliness researcher, and of course, with her own experiences, Pam has a unique perspective on a lot of these cases that we talk about here on Gulf Coast Confidential. And in this episode called Chris Watts Did What?, we're talking about the cruel and unimaginable murders committed by this Colorado father and oil field worker, Chris Watts, who killed his family to be with his girlfriend. And we regularly talk about national cases here on Gulf Coast Confidential because the crimes are similar to ones that we've seen here and all over the world, really, and we can learn a lot from them. And a warning now, this is a particularly violent and tragic case with details that could be very upsetting to people because it deals with child murder among some other heinous acts. So if you're not familiar with the case, be warned, and we're going to go ahead and give you a recap now. In August of 2018, Chris Watts, like I said, an oil field worker, strangled his pregnant wife, Shanann, then smothered their two young daughters, 4-year-old Bella and 3-year-old Celeste. He hid their bodies in an oil field. In fact, he buried his wife in a shallow grave there, and he shoved the bodies of his two little girls in an oil vat through an opening that was barely big enough for them to fit in, and he caused additional damage to their small bodies. Watts pleaded guilty in exchange for being spared a possible death sentence. He is not eligible for parole. He was found guilty of 9 charges, 5 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of unlawful termination of pregnancy, and 3 counts of tampering with a dead body. He is now serving his life sentence at a maximum security prison in Wisconsin, where he was moved for security reasons. Investigators say he is an outcast even among criminals, and it's easy to see why. Mm-hmm. What a horrible, horrible story. I mean, I know we cover a lot of tragedies, but researching this one, it just gave me a sick feeling in my gut. It was really hard to even get through it. Pam, you've spent a lot of time researching this. Why do you think Chris Watts did what he did?
I think he was selfish. I think he was a narcissist. And I think he had that addictive type of thinking that seems to pop up in every one of these cases. He basically went from a frumpy, doughy dad bod to a buff bod. And he's kind of a lame individual from what I look at, like a non-participatory person, let his wife do all the worrying and the planning and the doing. They were upside down on their house. They'd filed bankruptcy. He wasn't particularly happy that she was pregnant. He didn't want the baby. So I think he just wanted, now that he's got his buff body, he's 30-something, he's not midlife crisis yet. But we talk about this a lot. People's brain, they can think a lot of crazy stuff. And especially if you got some woman on the side giving you attention and this, that, and the other. Because Shanann was more of the project manager. She was a mover and shaker. And he was happy just going to work. And then she kind of created this pretend world on Facebook because she was in the multi-level marketing of a product called Thrive, which was like a little patch you put on. And I put these Band-Aids on just to show that. It was sort of like that, but it doesn't go there on your arm. It goes like on the back of your arm or on your back a little bit where you don't have any hair. But Chris Watts was known to wear 2 of those at a time, which is double the amount. It's the way a lot of people think. One is good, two must be better and three's out of this world, you know.
Well, it sounds like a lot of times, you meet people, maybe they weren't that attractive in high school or
Mm-hmm.
were late bloomers, if you will. And it's like once they suddenly get that attention or feel like they've achieved some sort of recognition or validation in ways that they didn't have before, it becomes almost an addiction. You just want to keep feeding that because all of a sudden it feels good to feel
Mm-hmm.
good about
Oh,
yourself.
yeah.
But when you make that your whole world and open the door to the devil, to the evil, to whatever you want to call it, you do become so just unbelievably selfish
Yeah.
because it's all about just meeting those
Mm-hmm.
needs. And it sounds like he just took that to the next level.
He did, and she jumped in there for him like a lot of people do, especially women for men or mamas for sons or whatever. And I mean, daddies and daughters have things where dads do things for daughters, but this was to the point where it was ridiculous. He weighed 245 pounds when she was with him. Then he got down to 180 by using these little Thrive things, and he just kind of thought he was it. And she
And
she
she
talked
wasn't
like
good
that.
enough for him anymore.
Right,
And the
in
family
his
wasn't
brain,
good enough
right.
for him.
Oh, she never was good enough for him, according to his mother. But she would say, "You're the best dad in the world," and she would kind of stage her life because she was an executive or a person that stood to make money on her downline in this multi-level marketing. I call it multi-level marketing. Some people call it a cult. Some people call it flim flam. Some people call it a scheme. But it is multi-level marketing. I don't like multi-level marketing. I like bricks and sticks retail things. I don't even order stuff online. But some people make good livings doing that. So he kind of went to work, did his job. Well, this is what happened when he went to work doing his job. There's a secretary in there, or they called her a geologist, but I'm going to call her a secretary because she was in there flirting around with him and everything, and him back with her. And he kind of thought that was fun. So eventually they have a
Consummate
tryst.
the relationship.
Right. And so it's just back and forth, back and forth. And she's into her body too, almost so much.
It's a vanity thing.
Oh, I just hated even listening to her interrogation because, I mean, basically she thought she was macronutrient Mary, protein Patty, and sit-up Susie and all these things. And she kind of was bossing him around with stuff like that, watching
He
his
likes
diet.
controlling women,
Yeah,
it sounds like.
right. He went from his mother to Shanann to this girl named Nicole Kessinger.
Right.
But at the first things first, Shanann at the beginning had gone to one of these multi-level meetings out, and she was coming back home at 1:48 in the morning, and she was pregnant, so she had a doctor's appointment.
Was this the night she was killed?
Yes, she was killed in the morning time, but on that day. And at 1:48 in the morning, you can see her on her camera coming up to her door. Her friend lets her out, and she's a perfect good friend. I was looking at this. She waited till she got in the door, and then she drove away.
Little did she know that inside the door was where the danger was.
Right. Right. And she knew Shanann's habits because I figure they were probably in the same downline or traveled a lot. They talked every day. She was going to drive her to her gynecologist appointment. So when Shanann didn't call her that morning and she wouldn't answer text and stuff, Nicole Atkinson, that's her friend, went to her house and could see there were her flip-flops by the door. She had left like her purse, her keys, her phone, and she was never without her phone. That Facebook is how she did her marketing. And so she kind of kept calling around to people, and she called the police, and she called Chris. And anyway, her just keeping on and on and on is what got the police there.
That's interesting. And didn't Shanann tell her friends, and I don't know if Nicole was one of them, but that she felt like Chris was no longer in love with her, and she was concerned that there was, I mean, I'm sure in a million years she never imagined he was wanting to kill the entire family, but she did understand that he might be unhappy, it sounded like.
Right, but he would always pretend. And she was one of the ones that she did tell. And she overshared that a little bit too. But I mean, I don't know where people go sometimes with, intimate feelings like that. Surely you probably would tell your best friends or friends, and that's what I took them as. So when the police get there, Chris isn't there right now, so Nicole calls Shanann's mom and says, "Can I get in the house?" And she's like, "You got my permission to go in the house," but it's not her house.
Right, she can't give the permission.
Right. So they get Chris there at a certain point, Chris Watts. And when he gets there, he goes to the garage. The first thing he looks in is her car. Shanann's car's still there. And the the car seats are in there. Then he goes through the house and he lets the people in the front door, the police, Nicole Atchison and her son. And so they go in the house, and it's immaculate. The house is immaculate. And the first thing that Chris Watts tells them, he doesn't go in there yelling for them, Bella, Cece, Shanann. He just walks through, very stoic.
And Cece is what they called the Celeste, the younger
Yeah,
one.
they call her Cece. She had a big personality, an active personality. Bella was like the little mommy and quiet. So what he does, he goes through the house, and he tells them, he goes, they didn't even, their blankets are gone. Their little blankets are gone, the little girl's blankets. And so when they're looking through the house, they see upstairs in the master bedroom that the sheet and the comforter are off of that bed. But the rest of the house is immaculate.
And that's going to be a red flag to any police officer.
Right, exactly. And her phone's still there, like I said, and her ring was on the bedside table.
Her wedding ring.
Her wedding ring.
And so what was the reason for that?
I think Chris took it off of her and put it on the bed table. Because
to support his story, because he wanted to say she took off. We were arguing about our marriage ending, and she left with the girls.
Right, without a purse, without a phone, without all this stuff.
Without her car.
Without her car and car seats, yeah. So I think he had a plan, but he's kind of dumb.
Well, he was just so self-focused. And I think they do build a fantasy world. I mean, we saw it with Lori Vallow. You see it over and over again in homicides right here on the Gulf Coast where men and sometimes even women crack and kill their whole families. But more often than not, it's the cases I've covered have involved men. But they just live in this fantasy world where they are the center of the universe. And if I want it badly enough and they don't understand how people investigate, and even if they think they do, there's things that they miss.
Right. Well, I mean, I would at least make sure the bed was made up, and
or get rid of the car or something. Right.
Yeah. He just. I stop and think and
it sounds like the friend just, jumped on it so fast he didn't have a chance to really, maybe it wasn't as planned and thought out as he thought it was, and he didn't have a chance to clean up after himself because the friend was right there.
Right. I think, and the neighbor, I'll tell you about him in a minute, I think that he thought he was going to go on to work that day and come back and finish all this stuff up. Because, I mean, who's going to be looking for him? Everybody. She's got a lot of friends. They're little kids. And he had already called the school and told the school, the girls won't be coming back. We're selling our house, And he had already set that in motion, too. But the persons, like you said, her friend, Nicole, and the next door neighbor, Nathan. I love that man. I want him to live next door to me. And, I got pretty good neighbors that live next door to me. But he was over there, and he saw him around there like, what's going on? He said, I got cameras at my house.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So did they find evidence from his cameras?
Yes, that's how they found all this. His name's Nathaniel, but I call him Nate. I just make his name up.
But you're right. We all need neighbors that care enough to volunteer. So many times you hear in cases where they're trying to solve a crime that the neighbors don't want to talk. Either they're afraid to get involved for whatever reason, retribution, perhaps they're, fearful for whatever reason. But good for him for jumping in and saying, not only do I live next door, but let's see what the cameras show.
Oh, yeah. And let me tell you what else he did. Okay, so he noticed Chris Watts had backed his work truck up into the garage. He said he never does that. And he had the cameras trained, not necessarily trained on that. It was the side of his house. Well, he could see during the early morning how Chris had made 3 trips to his truck during there. And he said he never loads the truck up that way from the back like that. And then he had the police come over to his house to watch the video there. And while they're watching it, Chris is standing there. Chris Watts is standing there, and he's
watching it with him,
looking on his phone, looking around, doing this, that, and the other, but watching a little bit. And Nathaniel or Nate, he's kind of like, oh my gosh, he's looking at all this, and he's thinking, what's he looking away for? I'd be studying every frame of this. But he's standing over there, and at one point,
he knew what he did.
Oh yeah, and he's just wondering what this other man has busted him on. And so he's standing there, he hugs himself kind of with his body like this, and then he's just kind of looking like he's so uninterested. But at the end of the little closed caption TV there, up pops a picture of a fetus. Takes the whole screen, a fetus. And Chris Watts looks at it, and he turns away like he can't stand to look at it, like his eyes are burning. And he literally puts his hands over his head, almost like that. You can watch his body language, and it's like, I can't believe I'm seeing that. I can't believe I'm seeing it. But the timing of it was some series coming on Netflix or something called The Horror something. I don't know the exact show, but that was the episode.
So he was playing the security video on a television monitor of some sort, and when the video quit playing, the
That's
show
what
popped
popped up. I mean, as big as the whole screen. Because I remember thinking, when I saw that, I was like, oh my goodness. And after Chris left, he left out of there, he told the police, he kind of whispered, he said, he ain't acting right, or something to that effect. He said, he never paces, he never's fidgety, he ain't acting right. And then the police kind of tries to mitigate it down a little bit, go, well, how would you feel if your wife and daughter were missing? He's like, yeah. And he ain't acting right. He never acts like that.
Right. And it was several days before they confessed. It seemed like police did zero in on him fairly quickly. It was within 2 days that he was arrested. But during those 48 hours, they're gathering information. They're talking to a lot of people. But it wasn't until they actually found the bodies, according to the FBI, that he actually confessed. And in their words, he knew he was caught. There was nothing else he could say. He didn't have any other choice. But, I have to think, even when I saw that the FBI investigators credited that as the reason that he confessed, I think of other killers that didn't confess. We talked about the bad nurse. And even when he was confronted with the evidence, he never did confess until his friend, the good nurse, basically elicited a confession. So it seemed to me like on some levels he just couldn't take the pressure anymore, that maybe it was just, I can't keep this up. If there's some way, maybe he wasn't smart enough to keep his mouth shut or just to continue lying.
Right. Or just get a divorce. I mean, I don't understand.
Well, I meant with the police.
Oh,
yeah. Leading up to that, of course. Yeah.
Well, he kind of got trapped by a lady detective that she went in to interview him. She was very soft and feminine with him, and they kind of even
his guard was down.
They led him down the road that said, well, did Shanann hurt the kids? And he's like, yeah, because that is what he said. He said,
I know, he tried to blame their deaths on her first. What a monster.
Saying she strangled them. And at some point
And then he lost it and strangled her in response to her killing the girls. It just makes no sense.
You can hear him whisper when his dad comes in to the interrogation room. His dad looks like a decent person. And his dad's name is Ronnie.
I read where he talked to his dad before he confessed.
Right, he did. He was right in the room with him. And the dad said, well, so what happened? He's kind of whispering to him. And he said, well, she hurt him, or something like that. And he said, and there's a sentence there that said, so I had to kill her. And so that's what, and his dad said, good God Almighty, son.
Yeah, I can't imagine. My heart breaks for parents in a lot of these situations. Even in the Dahmer story, you hear about the dad. And good for him for being there every step of the way at the trial. But at the same time, I do know of other families that they just don't. What can you do? I mean, but you don't necessarily want to have that red hot spotlight on you as the parent of a person who's done these horrible things.
Yeah. But his parents kind of doubled down. They've stayed with him. And that's part of the problem, is that they didn't like Shanann. And they didn't see any of his flaws.
Yeah, and you mentioned that the mother and her daughters, Chris's sisters, disliked her, Shanann, so much that they did not come to the wedding.
Or I know the mother didn't come, and so that was kind of a red flag right there.
Well, and it also indicates, and again, we don't know, we haven't met them personally, but it certainly seems as though in a lot of these cases you have these men that have been pandered to by overprotective, whatever the reason is, these mothers that just tell them they can do no wrong, that they were born perfect and everything they do is golden just because they're their sweet little boy, or their good little boy, or their handsome little boy, or whatever it may be. You came from my, loins, so you must be amazing, and can't be this woman that you married. But even still, it sounds like the mother was somewhat dominating and controlling, to say the least, and he was finding those same types of women in love.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I mean, you can see it. For instance, when Shanann had let Chris's mother take Bella and Cece, his mother had given them a treat, I think a cake or a cupcake or something, that had peanuts in it. And Cece was severely allergic to peanuts. And so Shanann always had to keep an EpiPen with her all the time. We're not talking about a little rash on your skin. We're talking about her throat will close up. So Shanann had told Chris, look, you're going to have to get control of your mother, type of thing. And I don't guess he liked that. And I guess the mother didn't like that. And so Chris had nicknamed that little episode that happened with Shanann and her mother and the kids, Nutgate. He said, all that over the nuts and the allergy. And she's like, yes.
Well, what was the episode?
Chris's mother had given the girls cupcakes with nuts in them. And Shanann did not like that.
Because it could kill one of her children.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. She had to keep the EpiPen with her all the time, and she's kind of vigilant about it. And I don't think she was overly scared about stuff, but I mean,
She recognized that this mother-in-law was not as respectful of her daughter's health issues as perhaps she should be.
right. She's a grandmother. You would want to be able to leave your children with their grandmother, and if that's going to happen, so she's
It was a passive-aggressive swipe at Shanann is how she took it, yes.
And she contacts Chris and goes, "You need to talk to your mother. You know,
this is a problem, it's dangerous, et cetera." And then he called it Nutgate.
He called it Nutgate and saying, "You're just getting all upset over Nutgate."
Dismissive.
You know? Yeah. So, and then he's like, "Plus, that's my mother," and all this kind of stuff. So
attractive when a man chooses his mother over his wife. I bet that really goes over well at the house.
Lead balloon, maybe.
Oh, my God. So at any rate, he gets skinny. He's got comes from a family that tells him he's awesome as a doughboy. He's awesome as a skinny man. And this wife who's taken such good care of me and is working so hard and is trying to help us overcome this debt that I have gotten us into. They're overspending and is taking care of our children and is going to bear me another child. By golly, they got to go because they are interfering with my good time and my ability to get off is what it sounds like.
Well, it does sound like that.
I mean, I hate to be crude, but that's what it boils down to.
It does.
And with men, it's money and getting off, really,
well, and
a lot of
also,
times.
Well, sometimes it is, I guess. Well, he was turning gray, too, in the midst of this metamorphosis, this tan, fit, buff body. His hair was turning gray.
His body was struggling a little bit, or maybe
I
just
don't
getting
know.
older.
Maybe that's just how it did, but it worked for him. People thought it was a attractive look.
Distinguished.
That it worked for him. Some people, gray doesn't work, but it worked for him. And so there he is, fit and thinking he's fabulous and stuff. And so there's Shanann, 15 weeks pregnant. So they have an episode. I'm telling you, he's a terrible actor. Watching him, the home movies are what sunk him. There's so many home movies.
Whether he was a jerk in them?
Well, he's just terrible actor.
Gotcha.
It just doesn't translate. Even when the press was interviewing him and stuff, he's like, "Come back. I need to see everybody."
That reminds me of Susan Smith.
Yes.
Before they pinned it on her that she had killed her two boys because she also was having an affair with a coworker. And I remember she went before the media in that national press conference begging for her children to come back, and she was crying. And I was in college. I remember turning to my friend who was my roommate at the time and telling her, I was like, I feel like if this were a movie, she would not be winning an Academy Award right now. But I didn't realize that she had actually killed her sons, but you could see the insincerity in the way she came across. And you're describing, it sounds like he was the same way.
Horrible. I mean, even when I saw it the first time, I thought, he's not doing right, because you would expect some passion. And I read where a detective said, if something's happened to someone's child, much less both of them.
Or just someone that you love and care about.
Yeah. And he said, if you don't see, this sounds a little bit gross, but if you don't see snot and slobber coming out of their face, it's not real.
That's a normal reaction to heartbreak and grief and worry and fear.
It is, because I had it.
Yes.
I never slobbered that much, or cried, or
just to be out of your mind with grief and pain.
Right, to know where to go. I sure wouldn't stand there and go, well, I need to see everybody. Whoever's got them, bring them back, Well,
and I think that's an important point you bring up, and maybe a good transition to get into his behavior that we now know when he confessed to killing them, what actually went down, because there was no emotion when he was basically pretending they were still missing and wondering where they were. And then when he did confess and he said, tried the different stories. Well, first she killed the girls and then I killed her. And whatever the case may be, that's not at all what happened. But whatever excuse that he was giving, it was all done in this tone of really he just had no strong emotion about it. Even when he was saying that he killed his wife because she heard their children, there was still no strong emotion. And yet he tried to claim when he was caught that he was just so upset. But when you see what he actually did and when he killed them and how he exposed those girls to their made them ride in the truck with their with the body of their mother. That was just horrendous. Tell us a little bit about just how cold, cruel, and calculating that whole ordeal really was, especially for those little girls.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me say he is just a typical narcissist. That's what we see in a lot of these stories. The story of Narcissus of Narcissus is he basically fell in love with his own reflection in the reflecting pool, and that he was beautiful. either gender. He was beautiful to everybody, and he resisted all advances, but except when he looked in the reflecting pool. He beat his bare breast purple trying to get to himself, and so he dies, and a flower pops up, the narcissus flower. Okay, so here's where we are with this knucklehead. Okay, Chris Watts. All right, he goes there, and so Shanann came home at 1:48, like we talked about. So he had to kill her between 1:48 and 9 a.m. when her friend comes over there. So she comes back from this trip. She's probably tired. That's exciting, being at those kind of corporate things. And I'm sure she had to take care of everything herself, and she's got little girls. So who knows exactly what happened? And so they said that they had relations, that they had sex, and that, so all this is going on. And so Shanann was a fit woman. She had her little figure still, her pretty face and nice looking hair and everything. She was a pretty lady. And so I imagine she had to struggle with him unless, and some people have storied that he had given her Oxycontin or oxycodone during the night.
Drugged her?
That's what they say, because she would have to fight back. She could at least fight back. But during the time, he strangles her in some way.
And I read where the FBI said that he mentioned that she, quote unquote, may have been praying before he strangled her. So even if he had drugged her, she was aware enough of what was going on.
Yeah. And she's pregnant, too. So, I mean.
Praying for her life, the life of her children, and her unborn child.
They're in the other room. They're next door. And see, this is what haunts me with my sister's death and with every one of these deaths, and with Shanann's also. I think about people have last moments on this earth. And these folks like Shanann, Bella, and Cece, my sister, anybody else that was murdered, you're looking right in your killer's face. And I imagine Shanann was like, Bella, Cece, because that's what I imagine about my sister Sharon.
You want to live to fight for your children.
Right. So I'm sure Sharon was like, Biz. So that haunts me when I read these things, because we're not idiots. We know something happened. She didn't just lay there and let him strangle her and go, her next would be her kids.
She may not have seen it coming, but she saw it coming in those last few moments, and so did his daughters. In fact, I think he said that one of the girls walked in.
Bella did.
Yes.
Bella walked in and said, "What's wrong with Mommy?"
And he said she's sick.
Yeah. So then, all right, then they walk in. So I guess Bella's awake. So he wraps.
So there must have been some noise.
I'm sure. He wraps Shanann up in that top sheet that's missing. And I don't know about the comforter where it is, but the top sheet.
He probably used it to drag her body through the house.
Probably.
To the garage.
And so he puts her.
Or may have, anyway. I guess that's one of those things that probably came out at trial.
Well, you think about it. I think about this all the time, too. A rug, a hammock, a comforter, a sheet. Every story we hear, somebody has to get them a bin. They have to get them out of the house some way.
Yes, yes. There's another unsolved. Tabitha Warford also got pregnant by her store manager, was asking for child support. He was married, and then she disappears, and her comforter's gone. He was never charged, but the baby showed up on his ex-wife's doorstep because Tabitha Warford was home alone with her child, his child, although there's never been any DNA test, but that child showed up on his ex-wife's doorstep.
Oh, my gosh.
He was never charged. It's an unsolved to this day, but that comforter's missing, to your point.
Right. There's always something missing like that. And that's what I don't understand, why the police didn't push earlier. But, I mean, this is so bizarro world. It's all going on. And so he takes her down. That's probably why he backed the truck into the garage. But his neighbor, Nate, my favorite guy, he's looking around and he sees that, but doesn't exactly know what's going on. Because I'm sure now that he's all buff and everything, he can carry her downstairs, because that was upstairs. And so then he gets her and puts her in the floorboard. And you have to, he goes and gets the little girls, Bella and Cece or Celeste, puts them in the truck. Their little feet are dangling over their mama, wrapped up. And they're like, "Is Mom okay?" And they're like, "She's just sick. She's tired." So they're sitting there and they're clamoring to each other. They're not in car seats. Clamoring to each other. Just, they don't know what's going on. And then there's a stench in the car because upon death, there's a lot of gases in your body.
Right. Your bowels release. And that's what she was doing.
Had that. And so they're there, and Bella was in her little pajamas with butterflies and hearts on them. Cece had on a little colored shirt, I don't remember which color, and a diaper. And they're barefoot, and they're sitting there. Chris Watts decides to go take them on a 45-minute drive.
Over their mother's body.
Over their mother's body. 45 minutes now. You can change your mind a lot of times in 45 minutes. Shanann's dead. There's nothing we can do about that at this point. So he drives out to where he works. I think it's called Anadarko Oil Field. And so obviously he's thought about this before. He buries Shanann in a shallow grave, and then he drives over to the 400-barrel oil tanks. There's 2 of them. That's 16,800 gallons of oil, 20 feet tall, 12 feet wide, with a ladder on the side. He smothers Cece, the little one,
In front of
Bella. And she was the spirited one, but I don't think she was real spirited then. She's tired, sleepy. She doesn't know what's going on. And so he smothers her, and then and then Bella goes, Daddy, are you going to do the same thing to me?
She said, Daddy, no.
Yeah, I know. That's what he hears in his head all the time. Daddy, no. Daddy, no. But she also asked if he was going to do the same thing to her. And so I think about this with those 20-foot-tall silos, for lack of a better word, carrying a child up that ladder.
Your own child.
That's right. There has to at least be 20 steps because it's 20 feet tall, and it may be more than that. You got a child. Each child probably weighs mid-30s. I know Bella weighed 38, so Cece probably weighed about 33 or 34. Carrying her up there, goes to the top up there. The hatch on the top is 8 inches wide. This is 8 inches. This is a bread and butter plate.
Here, I'll hold it.
Oh, sorry. That's a bread and butter plate. Not a dinner plate, a bread and butter plate, or a dessert plate.
So it's really just a little bit.
About the size of a lady's hand.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's that. And a child's shoulder girth is about 9.5 inches.
So he had to shove them in there.
And what he did, and if people are very sensitive, stop listening right now. He put them in feet first. He shoved their little hips through there. He had their hands above their head. And some people say that he broke their bones, but that is not true. I've read the autopsy report.
Folded them.
He folded them in like you pull yourself in, like that, because our sternum is the strongest bone in our body, but it's
flexible.
Cartilaginous. Got a lot of cartilage. Can pull it in. And so he does that, and then the little head and the jaw stuck a little bit, and he puts his foot on their head, and he pushes them into the oil.
Right. They found a little tuft of hair, and
There were scrapes on on Bella's buttocks and on the side of their face. Bella mostly. Cece, when she went into the oil vat, she ended up prone, face down. When he did that to Bella, she went in and ended up supine or face up. So she had
those poor people that found those baby girls.
My gosh, I cannot say how that went because I will weep.
Right. And obviously those poor baby girls and then the wife too. But I mean, like you said, just to see your own father coming for you. And it reminds me of Chad Doerman where he's chasing his young boys across the yard and they're running for their lives and his wife and daughter are trying to save them. But yeah, it's just a level of cruelty. It's hard to wrap your mind around.
It is. And then, I mean, like he just did it over and he could have stopped it.
It wasn't a crime of passion.
No, he could stop.
It was calculated evil.
Cringe. He drove out there with their mother there. Their little girls scattering around like little girls will.
Who love their daddy.
Yes. I mean, even Bella had sang a little song that says, "My daddy is a hero," and kept singing it. And he said, I hear that every day. And I'm like, well, good.
You can't help but think he's doing that for sympathy, though. I don't think he really gives a crap.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. He is next level. He's going to hell on a scholarship because he is next level monster.
He is. Well, and you would think that, in so many of these cases, when you do kill your own family, a lot of these guys kill themselves right after. You know, you think of Amityville Horror, and he didn't kill himself, but it's the rare one that doesn't. And
Right.
so for him to not do it, and he told police he thought about it, and there's part of me that's like, I doubt he really seriously considered it. I think
Yeah.
he just thought he was going to get away with it.
Well, he had planned
and he
it
didn't
out.
feel bad. It
Right.
was not a crime of passion. It was a crime of passion for himself
Right.
and for his desire to be with this other woman and
Right.
live this life that he felt like he suddenly deserved because he thought he was hot. So again, not to be crude, but he didn't want to have to pay to leave his family to go be with some new strange.
Exactly.
So it was about money and getting off.
Exactly. And he had planned it all out, because he even did stuff while Shanann was gone on vacation. She kind of took a little separation from him and took the girls away for like 5
I
weeks.
wish she had stayed.
I know. But and then all that time, that's when he found that he could run around with Nicole Kessinger. He even had an app on his phone that's looks like a calculator, and that's where he'd hide all their lustful pictures and their pictures and stuff.
They were sexting each other.
Yeah. And then he took her out to eat one night. He had gone to a place called the Lazy Dog, and they were both, it was so ridiculous, the conversation they were having. She said, I don't want to eat at this location, Lazy Dog, because they don't have the healthy food and this, that, and the other. It's a beer joint. Okay. And so they don't have this, so they went to another one. He made sure to use a credit card that he could swipe, that Shanann would see the charges, because she was trying to watch everything. She wanted out of that bankruptcy and wanted to get back liquid. And so
Like a normal person.
like a normal lady. And she did sort of like my sister did. She looked at her credit card charges, and then she goes online and looks up the menu, because he said he had salmon and a beer, and that should have been $30, but the charge was $60. And he did that on purpose. He wanted her to see that.
I know, and that's just cruel. It's also a way of, like, again, getting his rocks off by watching her suffer.
Yep, and he just dared her to say anything about it. But, he's just a terrible actor, a bad liar, a liar, no doubt. But even on the polygraph, if there's any deception, it's at -4. He was -18, if that tells you anything.
Good
He's
Lord.
terrible.
Well, and the thing is, it's not like he's any better. I mean, he should be grateful that they didn't give him the death penalty. From what I read, Shanann's parents were okay with him with this plea deal because they didn't want any more deaths, and I can see that. I can see just the heaviness of all that ugliness, of all that grief, of all that violence, of all that pain. In some ways, you just want it to be over, and having him imprisoned forever. I do love the fact that he had to be moved to a maximum security prison in Wisconsin from Colorado because he was they said it was quote unquote for security reasons, but they hate that man.
Oh, my goodness. They do.
Well, yeah, because I mean, if you're in prison and, maybe you're in prison for drug crimes or maybe killing someone else who's a grown person, an adult, and you're not necessarily justifying what you did, but there are reasons. But you're away from your family, you're away from your wife if you care about her, you're away from your children if you care about them. And here's a man who just offed his whole family.
Right.
There ain't no forgiving for that.
Oh, no, especially little girls. Nobody, or little boys.
Shoving their heads into an 8-inch hole with your foot? I'm sorry they didn't get a shot at him before they moved him to Wisconsin.
Right. Well, I think about that with my nephew being somewhere. Even Bubba loves his mama, and so I can't believe people that kill their children. I can't believe people kill anybody, but much less your children, your little baby girls, and your mama and daddy and people like that. But people do.
Well, it doesn't seem to me that he has changed at all. I mean, even being there in prison in maximum security, he's still getting racy letters, according to reports that I read. He's receiving them from women. As we know, there are some women that just enjoy a murderer, I guess, or they find that attractive and sexy, like with Ted Bundy and other convicted killers. Even your nephew Brandon got letters from people and as well. But he's returning these letters. He's writing racy things in return. And then, of course, you can't help but make the comparison to the Scott Peterson, and Amber Fry case. But Amber Fry had no idea that he was married. Certainly not that his wife was pregnant. And she worked with police to expose him. What can you tell us about this girl? Is it Nicole?
Nicole Kessinger. She she knew she was the other woman. I mean, who does that? Somebody's married. Wait till they get unmarried, not separate. There are 7.88 billion people in the world. and I'm sure he's not the hottest guy ever.
Right.
You know, so
Or the only one with
well,
an appendage.
I mean, my
right?
goodness. Stop
Not
it.
to be gross, but I mean, it just boils down to that. Is he that special? I mean, they're everywhere, right?
I wouldn't know. But anyway, I'm
That's
like,
what my biology books say.
yeah, well, okay. But yeah, she just thought he was so hot and this, that, and the other. And she was just kind of a bossy chick. I couldn't even stand to listen to her talk to the detectives and stuff because everything was a big old yarn. Her daddy was even in the investigation room with her because I think her dad was in law enforcement. And when she'd go too far, somehow he would reel her in or bring her back. But everything, like, she was so principled. Like, I told him, why don't you try to get back with Shanann? You know she didn't do
Right,
that.
of course.
You know, it's just lie, lie, lie. But she even at one point looked up and Googled that, what do people think of Amber Fry? You know,
Wow.
and she did a lot of, she's not told the truth. She's not been forthcoming. She even said, I know I'm going to have to go in hiding. My life's fixing to change. It wasn't like she's an honorable woman. We know that because she's fooling around while he's married, got 2 little kids, and a wife that's pregnant. I mean, she's not my favorite at all.
No,
So
if it hadn't been her, it would have been somebody else.
Well,
though.
I know,
think
but
he would have gone after. He wasn't going to stop till he got the validation he was looking for outside of the
But
home.
Shanann was always kind of flirting with him and saying, I want intimacy with you and you're so wonderful. I mean, it was such an oversell that was awful.
Just wasn't enough for his insatiable narcissism.
I guess so. And then Nicole Kessinger, she's a piece of work. We are going to have to get into a follow-up on just her because I think she's in the witness protection program or something like that.
Wow, how come?
Because people hate her. I mean, you would not believe the people that think that she's complicit in this. Because while Shanann and the girls were out on their vacation, Chris brought her to his house, and he's been to her house back and forth having their tryst and stuff. So it's so disrespectful. But you know that she did not sit over there and go, yeah, you need to go back to your wife. But here, look at this sexy text.
They were creating an alliance.
Yeah. So they think, a lot of people, and when I say they, a lot of people think Chris Watts had help, and they think that it was her.
Ugh. So she went into hiding, perhaps got some death threats or something along those lines. Well, that's interesting. She will certainly get hers, whatever happens to her. Maybe she and Casey Anthony can be pen pals.
Right, or something like that. I don't know. I just, like I said, I couldn't listen to her because it was so nonsense.
Right. Well, what are your takeaways from this? We've covered terrible crimes where parents have killed their children before. And in fact, Kid Killers is the name of an episode where we talk about Chad Doerman and how he went after his young boys. We talk about Lam Luong, a Gulf Coast confidential case in Mobile, a father who was high on crack cocaine and killed his children. And they were all young, just like Chris Watts' daughters. But, you know, the takeaway on one level is just that, you know, if you're unhappy, find another way than murdering your family to get out of the situation. But you're not dealing with people that are necessarily, you know, in their right mind. Either self-centeredness or drugs or just drinking their own Kool-Aid has kept them in a world where they think this is justified. But what are your takeaways from this? It's something beyond just the horror of it all.
My takeaway is there, but for the grace of God go I, because anything can happen to anybody. Look, I look at my own family. Brandon was a saved little boy. He knows Jesus Christ. He loved his mother, but he got some bad influences in his head and was listening to the voices in his head and doing drugs at the same time. And that's what he did. He killed my sister savagely. And that is, and the same thing here with Chris Watts. He bought his own BS, like I always say about that. And people, we don't know how to deal with these people. And it's just so sad. And that's one reason why we do these stories to this extent, because this hurts to study this stuff. It hurts to think about it. But so many parallels happen, like the lying and the delusional and the narcissism and the people enabling on things. We tell the horrible facts because things tend to get sanitized and when it's dealing with this. Because watch this, everything from now on is going to be about Chris Watts. Chris Watts has rights. Chris Watts has to be moved. Chris Watts this, Chris Watts' parents. What about Shanann? What about Bella? What about Cece? What about Shanann's family? And I can tell you from being on that side of the coin, you don't matter.
Right.
It doesn't matter. So I made a mistake by not pushing out at first, by trying to say, my goodness, heck, I didn't know what to do or who to talk to. And that's why I'm putting myself out there. God forbid, if somebody's in a situation like this, talk to people that have been through the system, because it's not for you.
Right. And then it becomes, it's in the media, it gets reduced to a few sentences that describe something that's so diabolically heinous and evil. And then, years from now, let's say that there's an appeal and they find some technicality and case goes back before a jury. Hopefully that will never happen. But the reality of it is, if it were to happen, all those horrible details that show a monster that plotted and methodically killed his own family and his two little girls when he had plenty of time to change his mind on all three murders.
Exactly.
You want jurors to know these details. You want the public to know these details so that, in the court system, it doesn't become just another case, just another homicide, just another check the box and let's get this appeal through, get it dismissed or approved or whatever the case may be. You want people to understand these were human beings and that this was a very real and calculated thing. And when it's in the media like that, then it's easier, I think, for, the public to put pressure on the courts to do the right thing, for lack of a better way to put it. The law is the law. You got to follow the law. There are plenty of appeals that are justified. And people have been wrongly convicted and wrongly accused. And there has been bad evidence. So I'm not trying to undermine the value of the appeal process. But that being said, when you have a man like this, who it seems undoubtedly he even confessed doing what he did, if he were to ever get out on some sort of technicality, you would want every detail, shouted from the rooftops of what he did.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, look with Alec Murdaugh. All this is he's probably going to get another trial. Look at this. My nephew's going to probably get out every 6 months. We have to go back. He's going to get out. He said he's not through killing people. And it's like we have to sit there like little mouse person. And I'm not doing that. I'm going to raise hell every time I go. Every time they want to tell me about something he's done or remarkable this, I'm going to say, do you remember he did this, he did that, and he did this? Because my rights are just as important as his, and Sharon's were too. And the same thing with Bella, Cece, and Shanann. And I never want this to get whitewashed. We have to take the hard truth in. Doesn't mean we have to ruminate on it and stuff, but this stuff happens. It happened to this little family.
It sure did. Well, Pam, thank you as always for joining us on Gulf Coast Confidential.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us. That's it for Chris Watts Did What? And we appreciate you joining us on Gulf Coast Confidential. I'm your host, writer, and producer, Molly Barrows, with co-host and researcher Pam Hill. And a big thanks, as always, to director, editor, and production engineer James Roy. You can listen to more of Gulf Coast Confidential in our conversations wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And you can also watch on our Gulf Coast Confidential YouTube channel. And don't forget to like and subscribe as well. And speaking of that, Pam, we've got a little something we wanted to give away to folks, right? A little something, something.
I got this from Blue Sky over in Gulf Breeze. It's my favorite little tourist shop or souvenir
gift shop.
Or yes, you want to get special things for somebody. This is that Pensacola.
Ooh, I do love a Tervis
Right,
tumbler.
Let me let you show that up here. It's a Tervis tumbler with the Pensacola sign on it. And what we're going to do, if you like, comment, and share on our stories on Molly's page and on my page and even on James's, James Roy, his page.
Our Facebook pages, yeah?
Yes, Facebook. And yours is under Molly Barrows Journalist. Mine's under Pam Hill Pai, and James is under James Roy. And then we'll do a drawing and we'll give this away.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you find it on YouTube as well and like, comment, and subscribe, we'll certainly put you in the running too. So be sure to find it on our Gulf Coast Confidential YouTube channel. But yeah, these are fantastic.
Yeah.
I just love these.
Yes.
They
Well, I'll
travel
get you
well
one.
too. I know. I'm going to like and subscribe and comment.
Well, we're going to give one of these away every week.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to it. We certainly hope you look forward to it as well. And again, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.